let's talk about the timing of fire season in California. We'll go over when is the best time of the year in terms of fire danger, and then when is the worst time of the year in terms of fire danger, and what is the kind of science behind what's happening that determines your fire danger. So we'll just start in winter because that's probably, as you know, the time of the year where wildfire is not a huge problem in California. That's when we pick up the majority of our rainfall. The jet stream dips down into California, so then it brings some of those Alaskan storms down with it. And when we're getting this winter rain, it does still impact our fire danger in some ways. The main way is in terms of plant growth. So with more rainfall, you're going to have more growth. But what's interesting is this growth actually depends on the elevation you're talking about. So below 1,000 meters, that's going to be your non-native annual grasses, some coastal scrubs, some desert scrubs. Those are going to have their largest amount of growth directly after the first rain. So it starts raining, those just start growing like crazy. That's going to be below 1,000 meters. And then your plants above 1,000 meters, some more chaparral, some woodlands, some conifer forests, those are going to be most productive in late spring. They have bigger root systems, so they're able to tap into more water, but then they also like the warmer temperatures, and that's when they're the most productive. So lower elevations start that growth after the first rain, and then most productive during spring. Higher elevations, most productive in late spring as the temperatures start to rise. So the reason that's important is because fuel is arguably the most important factor when it comes to wildfire. If you don't have fuel, you're not going to have a fire. But then within fuel, one of the most important things is your fuel moisture. And then that's going to determine when your fire season starts. So your fire season starts almost at the same time almost everywhere. So this is going to be about 2 months after your last big winter storm. So as you get into maybe late spring, early summer, June, July, around that time, it can be delayed in some cases up in the very higher elevations. If you had a lot of snow during the winter, then that snow melt can slowly trickle some moisture back into your fuels. And then that can kind of put a pause or a delay to the fire season up in the higher Sierra. But almost everywhere else, your fuels are going to start drying out as you get into late spring, early summer. Now, the reason for this is kind of our wildfire vocab word for the day. Something called transpiration. It sounds a bit like evaporation, and that's almost how you could even think of it. Transpiration takes moisture from your soils, goes kind of through your plant, and then you could think of it as evaporating out of your plant. It's called transpiration. Now, when that happens, the moisture in your soils and the moisture in your plants is depleted. So that's going to start happening as temperatures warm up. That's, I would say, the most direct factor, but then you can also have more transpiration if there's higher winds and then also lower relative humidity. Makes sense that if the air is drier, it has the ability to suck out more of the moisture out of your plants, almost like how a dry sponge can absorb more water. So that's going to start drying out your fuel. So now you're getting into the time of the year where your fuel moisture is low and your flammability is high. So that's going to be the start of fire season. So that's going to be, again, maybe June, July, August in some cases, if maybe you picked up a lot of rainfall in the last winter. And then throughout the summer, your fire danger is almost going to continually increase throughout the entire summer because your plants are just going to be getting drier and drier and drier. And the analogy I always use is if you've ever gone to a campfire and you have a moist log or a dry log, it's much easier to start the fire with the dry log, and then the fire is going to burn a lot hotter and faster once it does. So throughout summer, your fuels continue to dry out. So the chances for a fire starting and then the chances for that fire being able to spread rapidly increases throughout the summer as things get drier. I don't think that's too surprising right there. Then you start to get into, well, actually within summer there is one other factor that can play into your fire danger that's kind of a wild card, and that's going to be the North American monsoon. This is where you have a high over Mexico that has very unstable, almost tropical, moist air. And occasionally that can shift up north into the Colorado Plateau or the Great Basin. And then you get these southeasterly winds that push in some of that warm, moist tropical air. And then that can lead to thunderstorms, mostly in your higher elevations and your inland areas. Not as much along the coast, just because we have much more stable air because of the marine layer. You have cold air below warm air, so more dense beneath less dense. So then that's not going to be favorable to thunderstorms, which like rising motion and a lot of convection. So you're going to have more of your thunderstorms for the inland areas and in the higher elevations where that promotes thunderstorm activity. Now, the reason that's important, well, you could say two reasons: rainfall and lightning. Now, when it comes to rainfall, unfortunately, these thunderstorms will often be so quickly moving, or they last such a short period of time, that you don't end up picking up enough rainfall to really impact your soil moisture. So it doesn't decrease your fire danger all that much, even though you might be thinking, oh, thunderstorms moving in, we're getting some rainfall, that's good for fire danger. Not enough rainfall to really make a good impact there. It's pretty hot that time of the year. It might just dry out by the next day or something like that. Where it can have a little bit of a wild card factor, though, is in terms of lightning. Now, just because there's lightning doesn't mean a fire is going to start. In fact, I believe I remember reading in one textbook that only about 5% of fires that were tracked in Yosemite, or 5% of lightning strikes actually led to fires when they did this study in Yosemite. So it's not a guarantee that the fire is going to start. And then when it does start, the large majority of those fires are going to be small. And fuel is the major limiting factor right there. If you have very dry, continuous fuels, you have the chance for a large fire. If you have not very continuous fuels, then it's going to be more of a small fire, and that is the majority of fires that we do see. So that's the impact that those summer thunderstorms have. I'd say overall it's a net negative in terms of it increases your fire danger just because of the lightning potential out there. And we've certainly seen that in California, the impact some of that tropical moisture coming into the state can have in terms of wildfires. We certainly had a lot of lightning fires pop up in 2020. I think that's a year no Californian will ever forget. So now we're kind of wrapping up summer. Things keep getting drier and drier. And then, so your peak of wildfire season is usually going to be August. I remember actually making a graph when I was doing my research at San Jose State. I tracked all the fire days where we burned more than 10,000 acres per day. And August was the peak. And then it just went down after August. Now, again, there's a bit of a wild card factor, though, in terms of your wildfires as you get into fall, because that's when you start having the big offshore wind events. And that's where there's a large potential for pretty extreme wildfire growth. So during summer, you can have those fires that just consistently burn maybe 2,000-3,000 acres a day. But as you get into the fall season, that's where you get your Diablo winds, your Santa Ana winds, your offshore wind events, which blow in warm, dry air. And that's where you have the potential for those just kind of random days where you'll burn more than 10,000 acres in one day. And it can kind of catch everybody off guard. So even though the number of extreme wildfire events goes down as you get into fall, there's that big danger of if an offshore wind event comes in, you can have a massive fire popping up. So the big question there is how much moisture is going to be in your fuels. You've been drying out all summer, and in most cases we continue to dry out through the fall. Your fire season's not really going to end until you get a really good rainstorm, maybe even 2 or 3 good rainstorms that kick off fall into winter, bring a bunch more moisture back in your fuels, and start this whole cycle again. Now, sometimes that can be delayed even through October, sometimes all the way into November, where as long as you don't have that first good rain of the season, your fuels are still dry out there, you start having those big wind events, and you still have the potential for some extreme fires. Now, what is kind of one final thing I should say about fire season is numerous studies have showed that the fire season is getting longer. So because it's warmer towards the end of spring, there's more drying of our fuels, and then that's going to extend the fire season on that side. Also, if there's less snow melt, you have less of the trickling effect into your soils and into your fuels as you enter summer. And then also, if temperatures stay warmer and things remain drier as you get into fall, then it's also going to extend the season on that side. And that's actually something that my own research at San Jose State showed. It showed that the number of days where we are above those thresholds for fuel moisture, temperature, humidity, those thresholds where extreme wildfire days are possible, in some cases it's gone up by more than a month if you combine all of those threshold exceeding days together. So that's kind of the overall summary of fire season in California. Some of what I was talking about came from this textbook, Fire in California's Ecosystems. I believe I'm on page 18 now. Next, I'm going to be learning about maybe some of the impacts El Nino and some of the other cyclical patterns have on wildfire. So if you want to hear about that and the rest of this textbook, you can stay tuned and come along on this journey of learning more about wildfire together. So hope this video was helpful, and thanks for watching.